everyone. Welcome to today's Pet Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Roberta Westbrook, and you're here with us at the Campus for All Animals, the Houston SPCA. Well, I first want to wish you all a happy new year. We're so glad to have you again for a wonderful start of 2024, and we hope that this year we can help you give more information about keeping your pets healthy and happy this year. So today, what I want to talk to you about is a very common problem that we see in pets, and that is intestinal parasites. So we're going to talk all about how you know if your pet has intestinal parasites, what are the signs, how do you prevent it, how do you treat it, and even more importantly, how can we protect ourselves from some of these parasites that can be transmitted to people. So if you have questions about intestinal parasites in your pets, please put those in the chat and hopefully I can help you. In the meantime, I want to introduce you to our pet of the week. Our pet of the week is Brendan. Brendan is a 2-year-old male shepherd mix. He is neutered and all current on his vaccinations, and he is looking for his new family. He's a wonderful pet, and he would make someone a wonderful family pet. The most important thing about Brendan is that his adoption fee is covered. Thanks to Tia and Cameron Johnston, part of the Houston, Texas football team, they have sponsored Brendan's adoption fee. So come on down and meet Brendan and all the other pets that we have available for adoption, and consider taking a pet into your home in the new year. So we thank you once again, and we hope to see you in our adoption center sometime soon. So let's talk about intestinal parasites in your pets. So there are several very common intestinal parasites that you can find more commonly in dogs, but they can occur in cats. And so those intestinal parasites that we're going to go through today include roundworms, which is probably the most common intestinal parasite that we see, hookworms, whipworms, and tapeworms. So if you have any questions about these parasites, please let me know. So let me start with roundworms, because roundworms are the most common intestinal parasite that we see. We typically see roundworms in puppies and kittens. And the reason is roundworms can actually be transmitted a few different ways. The first way is that puppies and kittens can ingest the microscopic eggs of roundworms in the soil out in the environment. When puppies and kittens are outside, they're playing in the grass, they can ingest the eggs as they're sniffing around, licking, putting everything in their mouths, or sometimes those microscopic eggs get on their paws, and then later when they're grooming themselves, they can ingest those microscopic eggs. As the eggs grow in the body, they can then turn into adults and eventually find themselves in the intestines. And roundworms are very common. The other way that our puppies and kittens can get roundworms is actually through their mother when they are going through gestation. So when a queen or a bitch is pregnant and they are giving birth to puppies or kittens, they can pass roundworms on to their offspring 2 ways. One, internally through the uterus, and then the second way is actually through the mother's milk. So as the puppies and kittens are nursing, they can actually ingest those larvae from the mother's milk. So that's why it's so common that we see roundworms in puppies and kittens, because they may have gotten it from their mom. Now, roundworms can also cause the characteristic pot belly that we see in some puppies and kittens. So if you've seen a puppy or kitten and you might hear us say, oh, they've got a wormy belly, or that puppy looks wormy, really what we're saying is they've got a characteristic pot belly that causes their belly to look distended, and that is usually a sign of intestinal parasites like roundworms.
All right, so then for how else would we get the other ones, like hookworms or tapeworms? Are they common, like you said, in the ground, or what are the other ways we can get those?
Yes, great question. So the way that we get other intestinal parasites is very similar. So hookworms are very similar to roundworms. Pets can pick them up by ingesting those microscopic eggs and larvae in the environment, in the soil. And then, so it's through ingestion, especially if that area has been contaminated with feces from another pet that was infected with hookworms or roundworms. So again, they're ingesting those microscopic eggs and larvae. The same thing for hookworms. They can get those also through the mother's milk and through the uterus. Now, when we're talking about whipworms and tapeworms, it's slightly different. So whipworms, absolutely, we can get those. Our pets can get those in the soil as well. But tapeworms particularly are unique. Tapeworms are transmitted by ingestion of a flea. So if your pet has fleas or has even had even one flea, and you might notice that your pet has fleas because they do this kind of biting thing, they chew themselves, it looks like corn cob chewing. If they ingest a flea, fleas can pass on tapeworms. And tapeworms are fairly common as well, particularly in pets that have fleas. So the transmission, the way that they get them is pretty similar.
All right, and how can we spot them in like the dog poop?
Yeah, great question. So roundworms, the first worm that I talked about, those are commonly seen in feces, and they are long and spaghetti-like. So if your pet has had a bowel movement and you're seeing long spaghetti-like worms, those are very likely roundworms. Hookworms can also be shed in the stool, so you can see them. They're much shorter typically, and we don't see them as commonly as roundworms in the stool, but you can. They're short. Same with whipworms, not as common to see in the stool, and they're even smaller than the hookworms. And tapeworms are commonly seen. So tapeworms are what you might see as singular, small, flat, white, what looks like the size of a grain of rice, a little worm that's wiggling in the stool or around the anal area. So yes, you can see these in the stool. If you notice this, please see your family veterinarian or come on down to our pet wellness clinic. What we will do is help to diagnose your pet with intestinal parasites by running a test on the stool. So if you're noticing that your pet has something abnormal in the stool, if you can, please take a plastic bag, collect that fecal sample, bring it with you to the clinic. You can come on down to our pet wellness clinic or your family veterinarian. We will run a test on that stool so that we can determine what type of intestinal parasites are present and make sure that you get the appropriate treatment.
All right, so you mentioned obviously physically seeing the worms in stool and the little belly for the roundworms. What other symptoms can dogs show if they're infected with any of these worms?
Absolutely. So there are other signs of intestinal parasites, and those include diarrhea, sometimes diarrhea that contains blood in it, and sometimes vomiting. So if you're noticing that your pet is having diarrhea, you're seeing the worms in the stool, or they're vomiting, that can be indicative of intestinal parasites. In some cases, particularly with hookworms and whipworms, there's blood in the stool. And if there's enough blood in the stool, especially small puppies and kittens can become anemic, meaning they can have low red blood cell counts because of the loss of blood through their intestines. And they become anemic and they can become very weak, and their mucous membranes often become pale. And that's because they're having chronic diarrhea with blood loss. So if you're noticing this, please get them to a veterinarian so that we can diagnose them and treat them right away.
So how do we treat them?
So the treatment is luckily pretty straightforward. So once we diagnose your pet with intestinal parasites, we can give an oral dewormer. So it's pretty easy. There are a few different types of medications that we can provide that will kill the intestinal parasites. There is, depending on the type of intestinal parasite, depends on the type of dewormer that we might use, because not all dewormers will kill all of the different types of intestinal parasites. So we need to be sure that we're using the proper medication, but it's usually a series of oral medication that we give every 2 to 3 weeks until the parasites are gone.
And if we don't treat them, let's say, they'll just pass is what we'll think, they're just in the poop now, but they'll just pass. Are any of these extremely dangerous to dogs if left untreated?
Yes, you might be thinking, well, if my dog is pooping them out and I'm seeing them in the feces or in the stool, isn't that getting rid of them? And can't they get rid of them themselves? And no, because these parasites will live in the intestines. They will stay attached to the intestinal wall, and they will feed on the nutrients from your pet. And so even though you may see, a few of them in the stool every now and then as part of just the natural life cycle, there is likely more in the intestine. And so if we don't treat these, again, they are eating the nutrients from your pet. So your pet can become malnourished, can become anemic, and in some cases, those parasites can travel to other places in the body and cause illness that way. So we want to make sure that we treat them, because the treatment is very simple and it's easy to prevent any more serious conditions.
In addition to obviously the pet's health, it can mess with our health too. Are any of these contagious to us?
Yes, that's a great question. So some intestinal parasites are what we call zoonotic, meaning they can spread from our pets to humans. The most important thing to note is that when you are handling your pet's feces, or when you're outside working in the garden, that you prevent this by wearing gloves. And that is because if you're working in the soil or handling your pet's feces with your bare hands, those microscopic eggs and larvae can get on your skin, underneath your nails. And if you've not done a very thorough job of washing your hands, cleaning the underside of your nails, when you eat, you could also ingest those microscopic eggs and larvae, and you could also get those intestinal parasites. So make sure you're wearing gloves, that you're protecting yourself when you're working in the yard or handling feces.
All right, most important question. How can we prevent these little nasty worms?
Yes, the prevention is key. Usually puppies and kittens that go to their veterinarian, we usually just deworm puppies and kittens because parasites are so common that we just go ahead and deworm them while they're puppies and kittens. Usually veterinarians will do 2 or 3 dewormings or administrations of a deworming medication 2 to 3 times. Then after that, your pet should be on a monthly heartworm prevention, and most heartworm preventive medications include a dewormer. So every month when you're administering your pet's heartworm prevention, remember heartworms are different than intestinal parasites, intestinal worms. Every month when you're administering your pet's heartworm preventive medication, there is usually a dewormer included in that medication that will also kill the intestinal worms. So monthly prevention through an oral product or a topical product is going to be the best way to prevent your pet from getting these intestinal parasites. Another thing that you can do to prevent your pet from getting these parasites is not letting them sniff around in the grass and ingest other feces of other pets. So sometimes when you're taking your dog on a walk, it's okay to let them sniff, but if you're noticing that they're eating things from the grass, or particularly wanting to eat the feces of other pets, please discourage them from doing that. They can certainly get parasites that way. Keep your pet on flea prevention to prevent tapeworms, and then don't let your pets hunt wildlife. There is another way to get some of these parasites, and that is through the ingestion of tissue from wild animals and wildlife.
All right, thanks so much for all this information. What else do we have going on at Houston SPCA?
Yes, so I do want to make you all aware that we would love for you guys to support us this year at the Chevron Houston Marathon. So we are getting a team together to go out and do 5Ks, half marathons, and marathons this year, and we need your support. We want to raise money for all the pets in our care and the pets that are going to be in our care this year. So you can please go to our website at houstonspca.org and please click on the link for the Chevron Houston Marathon and look at ways that you can donate and support us financially. We appreciate all of the help in any way that you can be part of our extended family, through financial help or through volunteering or fostering, or however you're able to give. We're happy that you join us every week here at the Pet Podcast. Thank you so much. I'm really fast.
Yeah.